This week, President Trump did something a sitting American president almost never does. In a radio interview, he singled out one specific facility buried inside an Iranian mountain and announced to the world on the record that the United States is coming for it. "Tell the Iranians to get ready," he said. "Tell them we're coming and there's nothing they can do about it." The facility he named goes by Pickaxe Mountain, and figuring out why a single site would draw that kind of direct presidential warning means understanding just how odd and how tough this particular target really is. In Persian, its actual name is Ku-e-Kalangezar, which translates loosely to Pickaxe Mountain. It's located in the Zagros mountain range in central Iran, roughly a mile south of the Natanz nuclear complex and about 135 miles south of Tehran. Construction reportedly got underway after a 2020 sabotage attack, widely blamed on Israel, wrecked an advanced centrifuge production facility at the above-ground Natanz site. Iran's response, according to analysts tracking the site since, was to start burrowing somewhere sabotage and airstrikes couldn't reach as easily. What separates this site from every other nuclear-linked facility in Iran isn't just how deep it goes. It's that no one outside Iran actually knows for sure what's inside, and that single fact is on track to become one of the most consequential unknowns of this entire war. Analysts believe Pickaxe Mountain houses two separate tunnel complexes buried far underground, accessed through two pairs of entrances. The number that matters most here is depth. The Institute for Science and International Security estimates the tunnel network sits at least 100 meters beneath the mountain, and it may stretch across several underground levels. For comparison, Fordo, a facility this channel has covered at length, sits roughly 80 meters down, and Fordo already took a purpose-built 15-year construction project and 14 individual bunker-buster bombs just to seriously damage. Pickaxe Mountain is thought to be dug even deeper. Iran has insisted, since building began, that the facility exists purely to assemble and manufacture advanced centrifuges. Nothing beyond that. But International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors have never once set foot inside, and U.S. intelligence agencies suspect Iran might be using it to develop an undeclared uranium enrichment capability, something analysts frame as a strategic hedge for the broader nuclear program. Put simply, a backup enrichment site buried somewhere so deep and so unwatched, it could theoretically keep functioning even if every other declared nuclear facility in the country were wiped out. That's the possibility keeping Western intelligence agencies awake. A facility that can't be inspected, can't be fully mapped from satellite images alone, and can't be verified free of weapons-grade enrichment activity, sitting entirely beyond the reach of international monitoring. And here's the detail that makes this story genuinely notable. Despite everything else happening in this war, Pickaxe Mountain has never taken a hit. Not during the 12-day war last June when B-2 bombers struck Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan in one coordinated operation. Not during the current fighting that started in late February. Every other major declared nuclear facility in Iran has been directly struck by now. Natanz's underground enrichment halls sit unrepaired, and at both Fordo and Isfahan the tunnel entrances remain blocked with dirt from the earlier bombing runs. Pickaxe Mountain has sat there, untouched, this entire time. Analysts think the site simply wasn't seen as operational when the earlier strikes took place, and that its extreme depth would have made it one of the toughest targets in the country to seriously damage, even had it been on the list. But that's shifting. Satellite imagery has been catching increased activity at the site for months. On July 2nd, the Institute for Science and International Security reported that vehicle movement caught in late June imagery pointed to active construction inside the tunnel complex, along with continued reinforcement of the entrance areas. Earlier imagery, from February, showed what looked like fresh concrete being poured over one of the main entrances. In other words, while most global attention has stayed fixed on the visible parts of this war, strikes on shipping, strikes on command and control infrastructure, Iran has apparently spent this entire conflict quietly expanding and fortifying this one specific site, betting that its depth and secrecy would keep it safe no matter what else unfolded. That's the backdrop that makes Trump's remarks land the way they did. In that same interview, he said the United States has plenty of eyes on Pickaxe Mountain, that there's no activity there currently, but that if there were, it wouldn't last long. In a separate comment, he was even blunter. Whenever they detect activity there, he said, the U.S. blows it up, which is why Iran avoids discussing it. Worth noting, that claim directly contradicts what independent satellite analysts have actually been reporting. Active construction, not a site kept permanently vacant. That kind of gap between a president's public remarks and independent imagery analysis isn't unheard of in wartime messaging. Sometimes it reflects a genuinely different internal read. Sometimes public statements are tuned for strategic effect rather than technical precision. Either way, the message to Tehran was unmistakable. This site is now squarely in the crosshairs. Here's where this stops being a political story and becomes a genuinely thorny engineering challenge. The mountain complex housing Pickaxe Mountain is reportedly bigger than the one holding Fordo, and its chambers are believed to run considerably deeper. Operation Midnight Hammer already proved that even Fordo, at around 80 meters down, needed a double tap method, stacking multiple GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrators on the identical aim point, some sent through existing air shafts, just to be certain of a kill. If Pickaxe Mountain truly sits past 100 meters underground, possibly across multiple levels, it could sit right at, or beyond, the practical ceiling of what the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the biggest conventional bunker buster in the U.S. arsenal, can pull off in one strike, or even a few. That creates a genuine strategic bind, since America's supply of these weapons is limited, publicly reported at around 20 bombs total at any point, with 14 already used on Fordo and Natanz. Restocking orders have gone to Boeing, the only manufacturer, but new bombs aren't expected until as late as early 2028. If Pickaxe Mountain needs the same multi-bomb strategy Fordo required, or more given its extra depth, military planners have to carefully weigh how many of these rare, costly weapons they're willing to spend on one target, especially one where even a full-force strike might not guarantee complete success. That's led some analysts to suggest a strike here might not even chase total destruction the way Fordo's did. Instead, the aim could be sealing the facility, caving in entrances and access tunnels to strip Iran of the ability to use the site, even if the deepest chambers technically remain intact. That distinction carries weight. Destroying a facility means collapsing its chambers and making it permanently unusable inside. Sealing it means burying entrances under enough debris that reopening them would require a massive excavation project done under active watch, neutralizing the threat without necessarily confirming what's inside actually survived or didn't. Given how deep and how unverified this site is, sealing rather than full destruction may end up being the realistic goal whenever a strike order finally comes. There's no substitute aircraft anywhere in the U.S. inventory for this job. The B-2 Spirit is the only platform that can carry the GBU-57, both because of the bomb's size and weight, and because the B-2's stealth design is what lets it slip through contested airspace and deliver a weapon this precise without being spotted along the way. Operation Midnight Hammer already demonstrated what a mission like this looks like in practice. B-2 crews flying more than 30 hours round trip from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, refueling in the air several times, carrying out a precision strike on one of the war's most heavily defended targets, then flying the whole way back. If Pickaxe Mountain becomes the next name on that list, expect a nearly identical mission profile, an enormous logistical effort built entirely around getting one irreplaceable aircraft and one scarce weapon into position for a job nothing else in the American arsenal is built to do. It's tempting to assume bunker busting comes down purely to explosive size, but the rock and soil above a target matters just as much, sometimes more, than the bomb itself. Much of the Zagros range is reportedly solid granite, and granite reacts very differently to a penetrating weapon than loose sedimentary rock or packed soil does. It's dense and hard, making it tougher for a penetrator to break through. But once you do manage to crack that granite through repeated strikes, the resulting shockwave and pressure can actually travel through the solid rock in ways that damage a hardened structure more than they would through softer material. The rock itself becomes part of the destructive force, sending fractures and pressure waves straight into whatever chamber walls sit beneath it. So depth by itself doesn't tell the whole story. The type of rock, how uniform or already fractured it is, and whether fault lines or natural cave systems exist nearby all determine whether a penetrating weapon can actually reach its target. It's worth pausing on how any of this is even known because it's one of the more remarkable intelligence stories quietly running beneath this war. Organizations like the Institute for Science and International Security build their assessments almost entirely from commercial satellite imagery, watching for a new access road, freshly disturbed soil, vehicle tracks leading somewhere previously untouched, subtle changes in ground texture hinting at recent digging. None of it requires classified access. It's all pieced together by cross-referencing commercially available photos against years, sometimes over a decade, of historical imagery of the same spot. What stands out about the Pickaxe Mountain reporting specifically is just how much has been assembled this way. The estimated depth, the entrance locations, the ongoing construction, all pulled from painstaking photo analysis rather than any confirmed inspection or human intelligence from inside the facility. That's a measure of how advanced commercial satellite analysis has become. Independent researchers can now build a remarkably detailed picture of a facility that official government inspectors have never once been allowed to enter. Zooming out from the targeting question for a second, the concern surrounding a site like Pickaxe Mountain isn't only that it's hard to destroy, it's what a truly hidden, unmonitored enrichment capability would mean for the whole system meant to govern nuclear programs worldwide. The International Atomic Energy Agency's verification system relies on being able to inspect declared facilities and track nuclear material. A facility that's never been declared, never inspected, and specifically designed to survive sustained bombardment is exactly the kind of gap that system was never built to handle. If a country can maintain a hidden enrichment capability that outlasts even a determined military campaign against its known sites, that undermines the entire rationale for using airstrikes as a tool to prevent proliferation in the first place, because the target you can see and hit isn't necessarily the one that matters most in the end. This also fits a longer pattern in Iran's nuclear strategy, one that predates this current conflict entirely. Going back years, Iran has consistently responded to setbacks in its nuclear program, sabotage, cyber attacks, earlier waves of strikes, by rebuilding deeper and more heavily fortified than before. Fordo itself was originally built partly because the earlier above-ground Natanz facility was seen as too exposed to airstrikes. Now, with Fordo having sustained serious damage during Midnight Hammer, Pickaxe Mountain looks like the next chapter of that same playbook. Build somewhere even deeper, even more hardened, even more secretive, trying to stay a generation ahead of whatever bunker-busting technology the US and Israel can deploy. That turns this into an ongoing contest between penetrating weapon technology on one side and underground fortification on the other, with neither side ever landing a final decisive edge. There's a diplomatic layer stacked on top of all this too. Iran and the US signed a memorandum of understanding earlier in this conflict, which Iran later suspended, and there's been reporting on internal Iranian polling pointing to real domestic pressure building against the regime. A decision to hit Pickaxe Mountain would represent a major additional escalation on top of everything already unfolding, aimed at a facility widely believed, though not confirmed, to be linked to hidden weapons-grade enrichment capability. Leaving it alone, meanwhile, risks letting Iran build a genuinely survivable, undeclared nuclear capability that endures no matter how much damage is inflicted everywhere else in the country. That's an extraordinarily difficult call for any president to make. There's also a strained question that doesn't get discussed enough. The US flies a very small B-2 fleet, by most public counts, somewhere around 20 aircraft total, and that fleet has to cover the entire strategic bomber mission for the whole country, not only strikes on Iran. Every mission against a target like Fordo or Pickaxe Mountain demands enormous maintenance, preparation, and crew readiness, and every hour those jets spend on combat runs is an hour they're unavailable for training or other contingencies. A 30-hour round trip with multiple mid-air refuelings into contested airspace against one of the toughest targets on Earth is a massive commitment of a genuinely scarce national asset, part of why missions like this don't happen casually or often. There's an economic angle, too, tied directly to how long GBU-57 restocking will take. Each Massive Ordnance Penetrator is an extraordinarily expensive, highly specialized weapon, and with replacements not expected until as far out as early 2028, every bomb currently in inventory represents an asset that can't be quickly replaced once spent. A strike on Pickaxe Mountain, if it demands the same double or triple tap approach Fordo required, could burn through a significant share of whatever remains in the current stockpile. And if that strike only manages to seal the facility rather than fully destroy it, planners are left having spent a substantial chunk of an irreplaceable weapon on a target that might still need further hits at a moment when new bombs won't show up for another year and a half or more. It's also worth sitting with how strange it is for a sitting president to name a specific target this far ahead of any actual strike. Target selection and timing for a mission this sensitive normally stays extremely tightly held, discussed among a small circle of military and intelligence officials, precisely because operational security matters enormously for a mission requiring stealth aircraft to slip through contested airspace undetected. Naming Pickaxe Mountain publicly, and doing it in a radio interview rather than a formal military briefing, is a deliberate move to fold public messaging into the strategy itself, chasing some of the deterrent value of the threat without necessarily following through immediately. Whether that kind of signaling actually shifts Iranian behavior or simply buys Iran more time to further harden and disperse whatever's inside the facility before any strike happens is one of the more interesting open questions hanging over this entire situation. Pull all of this together and a few things stand out. Pickaxe Mountain surviving untouched through two separate major strike campaigns, while every other declared nuclear site in the country has already been hit, tells you how seriously both American and Israeli planners regard the difficulty of this specific target. You don't leave a site alone that long, especially one under this much suspicion, unless you're still figuring out whether you have a weapon capable of doing the job properly, or unless you're deliberately holding back a limited stock of bunker busters for a moment when the intelligence case is airtight and the political call has genuinely been made. The uncertainty over what's actually inside the facility may be the most unsettling part of this whole story. With Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan International inspectors had at least some historical access and baseline knowledge of what those facilities held before they were struck. With Pickaxe Mountain, that basic level of verification has never existed. Any decision to strike will rest almost entirely on satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and analytical judgment, without ever having had eyes inside to confirm what's actually down there. That's an extraordinarily difficult place for any military and political leadership to make a strike call from, because it means wagering an incredibly scarce, incredibly valuable weapon on an assessment that can't be independently confirmed the way it could at the other sites. And that leads to the biggest strategic question of all. Fordo proved that GBU-57 can defeat a deeply buried, heavily hardened target when used correctly, with the right tactics and enough bombs stacked on the same aim point. If Pickaxe Mountain really does sit deeper, inside a bigger mountain with more extensive fortification, then a strike here becomes the real stress test of that capability. Either confirming American bunker busters can reach essentially anything Iran is capable of building underground, or revealing that there's a depth and hardening threshold that even the most advanced conventional weapon in the arsenal can't reliably beat. Given how much President Trump has already staked publicly on this specific target, that answer may not stay theoretical for much longer.